Hello everyone. In today's video, I bring you an absolutely incredible story that will make you rethink everything you've ever heard about the universe. We'll meet Dorian Hale, a businessman who experienced a life-changing near-death experience and returned with the revelation of the universe's greatest secrets. Have you ever heard about the numbers 3, 6, and 9? Well, what he discovered will leave you speechless. So, before we dive in, go ahead and give this video a like. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the notification bell to get all the updates. Get ready for a revealing journey full of mysteries. My name is Dorian Hale, and the story I'm about to tell you completely changed my life and my perspective on what it means to be alive. Before we embark on this extraordinary journey, I think it's important for you to know a bit about who I was. In 1994, I was a successful businessman, the owner of 2 prosperous jewelry stores in sunny Florida. My life revolved around work, always seeking the next big deal, the next opportunity to expand my empire. I lived in a constant cycle of trade shows, exhibitions, and negotiations. To be honest, there wasn't much room for anything else in my life besides business. I attended more than 30 trade shows a year, traveling all over the country. The largest and most important of these took place in Tucson, Arizona. It was a grand event that attracted thousands of people from the jewelry and gemstone industry. Merchants, collectors, and enthusiasts from all corners of the world gathered there, creating an electrifying atmosphere of business and networking. That year, I was particularly excited about the Tucson Fair. I had big expectations, new contacts to make, and promising deals to close. Little did I know that this trip would be much more than just another business event in my packed schedule. I admit that, at the time, I didn't pay much attention to spiritual or philosophical matters. My focus was on the tangible, the measurable. Success to me meant profit and business growth. The idea of an afterlife or transcendental experiences was something distant from my reality. If someone had told me a story like the one I'm about to share, I probably would have been skeptical, maybe even a bit dismissive. But the universe has an interesting way of surprising us, pulling us out of our comfort zones, and making us question everything we thought we knew. And that's exactly what happened to me at that fair in Tucson in 1994, an experience that began with inexplicable symptoms of a mysterious illness and ended with a journey beyond the boundaries of life and death. What happened in those days not only changed my worldview but transformed the essence of who I was. It reshaped my priorities, my values, and my understanding of the purpose of life. This is the journey I want to share with you now, in all its surprising and transformative details. It all began on the 3rd day of the Tucson Fair. Until then, the event was going as planned. I was busy, as always, navigating between booths, closing deals, and enjoying the buzz typical of these large commercial gatherings. But something wasn't right. At first, it was just a subtle feeling that something was off, a tiredness that seemed deeper than usual, considering the intense pace of the event. I tried to ignore it, attributing it to the natural exhaustion of busy days filled with negotiations and networking. But as the day went on, the symptoms intensified. A fever started to emerge, not suddenly but gradually, like a wave of heat spreading through my body. My skin was hot to the touch, and I alternated between chills and intense heat waves. My mind, usually sharp and focused on business, started to become foggy. I found myself losing my train of thought during conversations, something that never happened to me. The physical discomfort was accompanied by a sense of disconnection, as if I were observing everything through a veil. The voices around me seemed distant, and the colors of the environment appeared strangely intensified. It was as if my senses were out of balance, some hyperactive while others dulled. As the afternoon turned into evening, the situation worsened. Exhaustion became overwhelming. Every step was an effort, every word a struggle. My colleagues noticed the change, expressing concern about my pale appearance and unusual behavior. I, who had always been known for my energy and enthusiasm, could barely hold a coherent conversation. Finally, I admitted to myself that something was seriously wrong. I decided to end my participation in the event early and return to the hotel. The trip from the convention center to my room is a blurry memory. I vaguely remember saying goodbye to a few colleagues, their worried expressions etched in my memory. When I reached the room, all I wanted to do was lie down and rest. I barely managed to change my clothes before collapsing into bed. The world around me seemed to spin, and a heavy sensation settled in my chest. Breathing became a conscious effort, each breath more difficult than the last. Lying there, alone in a hotel room far from home, a frightening thought crossed my mind. What if this was more than just a simple illness? What if it was something truly serious? For the first time in many years, I felt genuine fear. Not fear of losing a deal or failing professionally, but fear for my own life. As darkness began to envelop me, I had no idea that I was about to embark on the most extraordinary journey of my existence. A journey that would take me beyond the limits of what I believed was possible, challenging everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what lies beyond. What happened next is something that, even years later, still deeply moves me when I recall it. Lying in that hotel bed, I felt my body growing heavier and heavier, as if sinking into the mattress. My breathing was shallow and labored, each breath a conscious effort. The room around me seemed to oscillate between extreme clarity and a hazy blur. It was at that moment that I realized something truly extraordinary was happening. Suddenly, I felt a subtle but profound shift. It was as if an invisible connection was loosening, an anchor being lifted. The heaviness in my body began to dissipate, replaced by a lightness I had never experienced before. Then it happened. In one moment, I was looking at the ceiling of the room. In the next, I was looking at myself, lying in bed. The transition was so smooth that at first, I didn't fully realize what had happened. I was floating a few meters above my physical body, observing the scene below with surprising clarity. The sensation was indescribable. There was no fear, no panic. On the contrary, I was overwhelmed by a deep peace and intense curiosity. Myself that floated had no weight, felt no pain, had no limitations. It was as if I had freed myself from all the physical restraints that held me down. Looking down, I saw my body in bed. It looked so fragile, so vulnerable. I could see my chest rising and falling in shallow, irregular breaths. My face was pale, with an expression of discomfort. It was surreal to observe my own body this way, like a detached spectator. Around me, the hotel room seemed different. The colors were more vibrant, more alive than I had ever seen. Every detail was crystal clear, from the folds in the sheets to the small imperfections in the paint on the wall. It was as if my senses had been exponentially heightened. But the most remarkable thing was the light. A soft, welcoming light enveloped me, a luminous mist that seemed to emanate from all directions and from nowhere at the same time. It wasn't blinding, but comforting, like a warm embrace. This light seemed to pulse with a life of its own, reacting to my thoughts and emotions. At that moment, I had a deep, inexplicable understanding. I was no longer bound to the physical world. The reality I had known, that I believed to be the only one, was just a small part of something much greater. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a universe of possibilities and dimensions I had never imagined. The feeling of being home washed over me. It was a sense of belonging so deep, so complete, that it made my entire previous life seem like a distant dream. For the first time, I felt that I was exactly where I was meant to be, part of something infinitely greater and more meaningful than my earthly existence. As I floated there, between two worlds, I understood that I was on the threshold of an extraordinary journey. A journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the purpose of our existence. And despite the unknown that lay before me, I felt no fear, only immense curiosity and an openness to what was to come. As I floated in that luminous space, something even more extraordinary happened. Gradually, I began to realize that I was not alone. Familiar presences began to manifest around me, as if emerging from the very light that enveloped me. The first presence I recognized took my breath away, though I wasn't really breathing in that state. It was my brother, Thaddeus. Seeing him there, in front of me, was an emotional shock. Thaddeus had died years earlier in a tragic accident, and his loss had been a wound that had never fully healed in my heart. But there he was, not as I remembered him in his last days, but radiant, full of life and youth. His eyes shone with a wisdom beyond his earthly years. He didn't speak immediately, but his smile conveyed more than words could express. It was a smile of welcome, of understanding, of unconditional love. Beside Thaddeus, other figures began to form. They were faces I recognized, though I couldn't immediately identify them. Grandparents I had barely known, friends who had passed long ago, and even people I had briefly encountered in my life but who had clearly left a mark on my soul. Each of these presences radiated an aura of love so pure and intense that it was almost palpable. There was no judgment in their eyes, only acceptance and deep understanding. It was as if they could see through all the layers I had built up over my life, directly into the essence of my being. Thaddeus was the first to speak, and his voice resonated not through the air, but directly in my consciousness. "Welcome, brother Somewhere," he said. "Don't be afraid. We are here to guide you on this journey." His words brought a wave of emotions I didn't know I could feel. Joy, relief, love, all mixed together in an overwhelming experience. I wanted to embrace him, to tell him how much I missed him, to apologize for all the times we argued in life. But before I could express anything, Thaddeus continued, "I know you have many questions, Dorian, and all of them will be answered in due time. But first, there is something you need to see and experience." The other presences moved closer, forming a circle around me. Each of them seemed to emanate a unique energy, a vibration that I could feel resonating within me. It was as if each of these souls had a story to share, a lesson to teach. A figure that vaguely reminded me of my grandmother approached. Though her features were different from how I remembered, her essence was unmistakable. She smiled gently and said, "You have grown so much, my dear, but there is still much to learn." Another presence, whom I couldn't identify but who felt strangely familiar, added, "Your journey is just beginning, Dorian. What you will see and learn here will change everything." I felt overwhelmed by all of this. It was too much information, too much emotion to process. Part of me wanted to ask 1,000 questions, to understand everything immediately. But another part, a deeper and wiser part, knew that I needed to simply accept and experience. Thaddeus, sensing my confusion, placed what seemed like a hand on my shoulder. Though in that state, the sensation was more like an energy merging with mine. "Don't worry about understanding everything now, brother. Just feel. We are here to guide you through what comes next. And believe me, it's something you need to experience for yourself." With those words, I felt a shift in the environment around me. The light began to intensify, and I had the sense that I was about to embark on the next stage of this extraordinary journey. A journey that, I was beginning to realize, would go far beyond anything I could have imagined. With a gentle gesture, Thaddeus indicated that it was time to move forward. The environment around us began to change, the light transforming into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. Suddenly, I found myself immersed in what I can only describe as a multidimensional film of my own life. Scenes from my past began to unfold before me, not in a linear way, but as a complex tapestry where all moments existed simultaneously. I saw my childhood, my adolescence, my first steps into the business world. Each memory was vivid, more real than when I had originally lived it. But this wasn't just a simple retrospective. As each scene played out, I didn't just observe it, I relived it, feeling every emotion, every thought, as if I were there again. And not only that, I also experienced the impact of my actions and words on the people around me. I saw the moment when, as a child, I consoled a friend who had lost their pet. At the time, I thought I hadn't done much, but now I could feel the comfort and gratitude my friend had felt. How that small act of kindness had helped them cope with the loss. How my words had affected their self-esteem and livelihood. Every action, every choice, every word spoken or left unsaid, everything had a weight, an impact that extended far beyond what I could have ever imagined. I saw how small acts of kindness created waves of positivity, influencing not just the direct recipient but also those around them. And I saw how negative actions created cycles of pain and resentment that spread in ways I had never realized. One scene in particular struck me deeply. It was an ordinary day at work, a few years earlier. An employee had come to me, clearly upset, wanting to talk. I remembered dismissing her, saying I was too busy. Now, reliving that moment, I felt her disappointment, her sense of insignificance. I saw how she desperately needed someone to listen to her that day. How my rejection made her question her worth. Thaddeus, who had been by my side throughout this experience, gently commented, "See, Dorian, how every moment of our lives is connected to countless others. Our actions have a power we rarely perceive." As the review continued, I began to see patterns in my life. I saw how my relentless pursuit of business success had distanced me from meaningful relationships, how I had neglected important aspects of life in favor of what I thought was progress. But I also saw moments of true connection and compassion. I remembered a time when I stopped to help a stranger on the street, something I had almost forgotten. Now, I could feel the profound impact that simple act of kindness had on that person's life. It was an overwhelming experience, sometimes painful, but incredibly enlightening. For the first time, I saw my life not just through my eyes, but through the eyes of everyone whose lives I had touched, for better or for worse. When the review ended, I felt emotionally exhausted, but also deeply transformed. I looked to Thaddeus for guidance. He smiled understandingly and said, "This review is not a judgment, Dorian. It's an opportunity to learn, to understand. What you do with this knowledge is what truly matters." I nodded, feeling the weight and responsibility of this new understanding. I realized that every moment of our lives is an opportunity to grow, to love, to make a difference. And I promised myself that, if I had the chance to return, I would live in a very different way. But my journey was far from over. Thaddeus indicated that there was more to see, more to learn. And so, we prepared for the next stage of this incredible odyssey beyond life. After the intense life review, I felt emotionally exhausted, yet oddly invigorated. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my soul, replaced by a clarity I had never experienced before. It was in this moment of deep reflection that Thaddeus gently touched my shoulder, or whatever the energetic manifestation of a shoulder was in that realm. "There is someone you need to meet, Dorian," he said, his voice echoing directly in my consciousness. He appeared as one. His age was impossible to determine. He seemed both ancient and eternally young at the same time. His eyes, a deep blue, seemed to contain entire galaxies. When he smiled, I felt a wave of warmth and acceptance envelop me. "Welcome, Dorian," he said, his voice resonating not just in my ears but throughout my entire being. "I am your spiritual guardian." I was stunned. A spiritual guardian. The idea that I had a being designated to guide and protect me had never crossed my mind during my earthly life. As if reading my thoughts, and perhaps he truly could, the guardian continued, "Yes, Dorian, I have been with you since the beginning of your earthly journey. In every crucial moment, at every crossroads, I was there, silently guiding, inspiring, protecting." Images began to flow through my consciousness. I saw moments of my life, important decisions I had made, ideas that seemed to come out of nowhere, even moments of danger I had inexplicably avoided. In each of these scenes, I could sense the subtle presence of my guardian. "Do you remember the time you decided not to go on that business trip, without really knowing why?" the Guardian asked, a gentle smile on his face. Or when you had that sudden idea for a new jewelry line, which became your greatest success? I nodded, amazed. How many times had I attributed these inspirations to chance or my own intuition? The Guardian continued, My role is not to control your actions or make decisions for you, Dorian. Free will is sacred, but I am here to guide, to whisper ideas, to offer a soft light on the path when darkness seems impenetrable. A wave of gratitude washed over me. All those times I felt alone, lost, uncertain. I had never truly been alone. But why did I never know this? I asked, my voice, or thought, trembling with emotion. The Guardian smiled with understanding. Earthly life is a veil, Dorian. It's part of the journey to discover, grow, and learn on your own. If you had known of my constant presence, how could you truly exercise your free will? How could you learn the lessons that only come through choices, right or wrong? I realized then that my Guardian was not just a protector, but a teacher. Every challenge, every obstacle in my life had been an opportunity for growth, carefully orchestrated for my spiritual development. And now? I asked, sensing that I was on the verge of an even greater revelation. The Guardian extended his hand, a gesture of invitation and promise. Now, Dorian, it is time to see beyond the veil, to truly understand your place in the great fabric of the universe. With a mix of apprehension and excitement, I accepted his invitation, ready for the next stage of this extraordinary journey. As I accepted my spiritual guardian's invitation, I felt a profound shift begin to take place. It was as if every particle of my being, if it could still be called that, was reconfiguring, aligning with a higher frequency. The sensation was indescribable. Imagine the most intense explosion of joy, peace, and understanding you've ever experienced, and multiply that by infinity. Every fiber of my being vibrated in harmony with the universe. I looked at my hands and realized I no longer had a defined form. I was pure light, conscious energy. There were no more boundaries, no more separation between me and the rest of the cosmos. It was as if I had merged with the very essence of creation. In this state, I began to perceive things that had previously been beyond my understanding. I saw the interconnectedness of all things, how every thought, every action, every particle of existence was intrinsically linked to every other. The universe was not a collection of separate objects, but a cosmic dance of energy and consciousness. My Guardian, now also a form of pure light beside me, communicated, This, Dorian, is a glimpse of your true nature. Beyond the physical body, beyond even the spiritual form you've experienced so far, this is the essence of who you truly are. I then understood that my life on Earth, my identity as Dorian Hale, was just a small fraction of my total existence. It was like I had spent my entire life believing I was just a drop of water, only to discover that I was the entire ocean. In this state of expanded consciousness, I began to access knowledge and memories that went far beyond my current life. I saw other lives, other experiences, other worlds. I realized that the journey of the soul is far more vast and complex than I could have ever imagined. But the most striking thing was the feeling of universal love that permeated everything. It wasn't love as we know it on Earth, limited and conditional. It was a love that encompassed everything, that accepted everything, that understood everything. In that moment, I loved every being, every particle of the universe, unconditionally. My Guardian, sensing my state of ecstasy and understanding, gently reminded me, Remember this feeling, Dorian. Remember who you truly are. Even when you return to the more limited form, even if you return to earthly life, this truth will always be within you. I absorbed his words, knowing they held wisdom I would carry with me forever. But something in his tone made me realize that our journey was not yet over. There was more to be revealed, more to be understood. And so, still in this state of pure light and expanded consciousness, I prepared for the next stage of this incredible cosmic odyssey. As I was still absorbing the magnitude of my transformation into a being of light, I noticed that the environment around us was changing once again. It was as if we were ascending to an even higher plane of existence. Suddenly, we found ourselves surrounded by beings of indescribable beauty and power. Even in my elevated state of consciousness, I was awestruck by their presence. They were the angels, not as we imagine them on earth, with wings and halos, but as beings of pure energy and cosmic wisdom. One of them approached, their presence radiating a peace and love that transcended anything I had ever experienced. When they spoke, it wasn't with words, but with pure concepts that blossomed directly into my consciousness. "Welcome, beloved," the angel resonated. "You are ready to understand some of the fundamental secrets of the universe." What followed was an explosion of knowledge and understanding that defied everything I thought I knew about reality. I saw the creation of the universe, not as a single event, but as a continuous process of expansion and contraction. I understood that time, as we know it, is merely an illusion, a necessary construct for experience in the physical dimension, but irrelevant in the higher planes of existence. The angel then showed me the significance of the numbers 3, 6, and 9. I saw how these numbers formed the foundation of universal mathematics, the key to understanding the structure of all creation. I vaguely remembered hearing something about this in life, related to Nikola Tesla, but now I saw the full truth behind that knowledge. "Observe," said the angel, and before us, a vision of the cosmos unfolded in all its glory. Spiral galaxies, shimmering nebulas, the birth and death of stars, all dancing in a perfect cosmic ballet, following patterns based on these sacred numbers. I saw how everything in the universe, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest cosmic structures, followed these patterns. It was a symphony of creation, where each note was perfectly harmonized with the whole. "You are made of stardust," the angel continued. "Every atom in your being was forged in the heart of a star. You are, quite literally, the universe experiencing itself." This revelation struck me with overwhelming force. I wasn't just a part of the universe, I was the universe. We all were. The separation we experience in earthly life was a necessary illusion for growth and experience, but ultimately, we were all one. The angel then showed me how our thoughts and emotions have a direct impact on physical reality. I saw waves of energy emanating from every conscious being, interacting with the fabric of the cosmos, shaping reality in ways we scarcely understand on Earth. The power of intention, the angel explained, is one of the most potent forces in the universe. When combined with unconditional love, it can literally move mountains. As I absorbed these cosmic truths, I felt an immense responsibility. This knowledge wasn't just for my own enlightenment, but carried with it the duty to use it wisely for the benefit of all beings. The angel, sensing my thoughts, nodded approvingly. "Yes, beloved. With great knowledge comes great responsibility, but always remember, you are never alone on this journey." With these words, I felt that I was being prepared for the next stage of this extraordinary journey. What more was there to learn? What else did the universe have to reveal? With a mix of reverence and anticipation, I readied myself for what was to come next. After what felt like an eternity immersed in the secrets of the universe, I sensed a subtle shift. The angelic presence surrounding me began to gently recede, like a tide pulling away. My spiritual guardian reappeared beside me, his expression serene, but with a hint of sadness. "Dorian," he said softly, "the time has come." At first, I didn't fully understand what he meant. Time for what? Surely, it couldn't be time to... "No," I protested, the realization hitting me like a bolt of lightning. "I can't go back, not now. There's so much more to learn, so much more to experience here." My guardian smiled with understanding. "I know, Dorian, but your journey on Earth is not yet complete. You have a purpose to fulfill, lessons to learn and teach." I felt an intense internal conflict. How could I return to the limitations of physical existence after experiencing the vastness of the cosmos? How could I go back to being just Dorian Hale, the jeweler from Florida, after having been one with the universe? Remember, my guardian continued, what you've experienced here will not be forgotten. It will always be within you, guiding your actions, shaping your perspective. Before I could protest further, I felt an irresistible force pulling me. It was as if the entire universe was pushing me back. I tried to resist, clinging to the light, to the wisdom, to the unconditional love I had experienced. But it was futile. The sensation of falling was dizzying. I was being compressed, forced back into a limited form. The vastness of the cosmos closed around me, and I felt as though I was being squeezed through a narrow tunnel. Suddenly, there was darkness, and then pain. A sharp, throbbing pain that seemed to come from every cell in my body. The contrast with the peace and expansion I had experienced was jarring. I opened my eyes with difficulty. The light of the hotel room was blinding. My lungs burned with every labored breath. My entire body ached, as if I had run a marathon. Slowly, the reality of the hotel room in Tucson began to solidify around me. The digital clock on the bedside table blinked 3:27 a.m. Only a few hours had passed since I had fainted. It felt like I had lived multiple lifetimes in that span. I tried to sit up, but my body protested. I was weak, dehydrated. The fever had passed, but it had left a trail of exhaustion in its wake. As I struggled to organize my thoughts, to reconcile the transcendental experience I had just had with the physical reality around me, one certainty formed in my heart. Nothing would ever be the same again. I had died and been reborn, not just physically but spiritually and emotionally as well. The revelations I had experienced, the unconditional love I had felt, the understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, these were etched into my soul. Gradually, I managed to sit up in bed. My body still protested. Every movement was an effort. I looked at my hands, marveling at their solidity. Just moments ago, hours, I had been pure light, conscious energy. Now, I was back in this physical form, with all its limitations and sensations. A sudden thought occurred to me. I needed medical help. As transformative as my spiritual experience had been, my physical body had gone through significant trauma. With effort, I reached for the phone and called the hotel reception, asking them to send for an ambulance. As I waited, I closed my eyes and tried to reconnect with that feeling of cosmic expansion. It was there, a distant echo, but real. A reminder that there was much more to existence than what our eyes could see. I heard sirens approaching. Within minutes, paramedics entered the room. Their voices seemed distant, their concerns so earthly. I wanted to tell them about the angels, about the secrets of the universe, about the love that permeates everything. But the words failed me. How could I describe the indescribable? As I was placed on the stretcher and taken to the ambulance, one persistent thought echoed in my mind. My life would never be the same. The days that followed my near-death experience were a whirlwind of medical tests, physical recovery, and attempts to process everything that had happened. The doctors were baffled by my sudden recovery from the mysterious illness that had nearly taken me. Medically speaking, I had been on the brink of death. They had no explanation for my rapid improvement, but I knew that the true transformation was happening internally. As my body healed, my mind and spirit were undergoing a silent revolution. The priorities that had once seemed so important, business success, social status, the accumulation of material wealth, now seemed insignificant compared to the cosmic truths I had glimpsed. I began to see the world with new eyes, recognizing the divine spark in every person I encountered, feeling the interconnectedness with all creation. When I was finally discharged from the hospital and returned to Florida, I knew I couldn't simply return to my previous life. The jewelry stores that had once been the center of my universe now seemed like just a means to a greater end. I began to make changes, subtle at first, but increasingly profound as time passed. I implemented more ethical policies in my business, ensuring that every gem and precious metal was sourced from sustainable and ethical origins. I began donating a significant portion of the profits to causes that benefited the community. But the most profound change was in my interaction with people. Every customer, every employee, I remembered the review of my life and how every action, every word, had a profound impact. Now, I consciously made an effort for every interaction to be an opportunity to uplift, to inspire, to love. I began meditating regularly, seeking to reconnect with that sense of cosmic expansion I had experienced. Although I could never fully replicate the intensity of that experience, those moments of stillness helped me maintain perspective, to remember what truly mattered. Over time, people began to notice the change in me. Friends, family, and even strangers would comment on the peace I seemed to radiate, on how comfortable they felt in my presence. I smiled, knowing that what they felt was merely a reflection of the universal love I had experienced. I started sharing my story, first with close friends, then with larger groups. Many were skeptical, others fascinated. But what mattered wasn't convincing them of the reality of my experience, but inspiring them to live with more love, more awareness, more purpose. Gradually, my focus shifted from the jewelry business to humanitarian work. I used my resources and connections to start projects that benefited underprivileged communities, always with the goal of empowering people, helping them recognize their own intrinsic worth. The life I lived now was infinitely richer and more meaningful than any material success I had achieved before. Every day was an opportunity to make a difference, to spread a little more light in the world. Of course, there were challenges. Sometimes the density of physical reality felt oppressive. There were moments when I longed for the expansion and freedom I had experienced in the beyond. But then I would remember the words of my spiritual guardian. This earthly life was an important journey, with valuable lessons to learn and teach. At night, before falling asleep, I often reflected on the day, on the lives I had touched, on the love I had shared, and I would smile, grateful for the second chance, for the opportunity to live with purpose, to be a channel for the divine love that permeates the entire universe. My near-death experience wasn't the end of my journey. It was just the beginning. Every day is a new opportunity to live out the truths I learned, to be a beacon of light in this world that so desperately needs love and understanding. And so, I continue my journey, one step at a time, one act of love at a time, always remembering that we are all one, all part of the same cosmic dance of creation and consciousness. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, share your impressions in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to as many people as possible. See you next time.